The rescue, the space station called Harmony Point, was never quiet. And Park Joon-ho had learned to love the constant noise of ships arriving and departing, of traders shouting prices, and of machines humming through the night cycle. He wiped grease from his hands and checked his work on the cargo loader one more time before nodding to himself with satisfaction. "Good enough," he muttered. Knowing his captain would complain anyway, Joon-ho was 28 years old. A human from Earth who had spent the last 6 years working on cargo ships that moved between the stars. And he had seen enough of the galaxy to know that most aliens thought very little of his kind. Humans were new to space travel, barely a century into their expansion. And the older species looked at them the way adults might look at noisy children who had wandered into a serious meeting. He grabbed his toolkit and started walking back toward his ship when he heard the explosion. The sound came from the lower docking bays. A deep boom followed by screaming and the harsh wail of emergency. Alarmed, Joon-ho ran without thinking. He pushed through crowds of aliens moving in the opposite direction, their various limbs and tentacles shoving past him as they fled toward safety. The smoke hit him first, thick and black, pouring from a shuttle that had crashed badly against the docking clamps. Fire spread across the floor where fuel had spilled, and the heat made him raise his arm to protect his face. "Is anyone inside?" he shouted at a station worker who was backing away. "One passenger, but it is too late," the alien yelled back, its translator making the words flat and emotionless. Joon-ho looked at the burning shuttle and made his choice in less than a second, pulled his jacket over his mouth, and ran into the flames. The heat was terrible, and the smoke filled his lungs despite the jacket. But he had survived worse on Earth, where he grew up in a coastal city that faced typhoons every summer. He found the passenger slumped in a crash seat, unconscious and bleeding from a wound on her head. She was tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like polished metal and delicate wings folded against her back. And for a moment, Joon-ho just stared because he had never seen a Volante before. Everyone knew about the Volante ruled a massive empire on the far side of the galaxy, rarely spoke to other species, and had a reputation for being proud and dangerous. What was one of them doing alone on a neutral station? The questions could weigh. Joon-ho unbuckled her harness and lifted her over his shoulder, surprised by how light she was despite her height. And then he ran back through the fire with his lungs screaming for clean air. He burst out of the shuttle just as another section of it collapsed, and he carried the Volante female away from the wreckage until he could lay her down on the deck where the air was clear. She was breathing but not waking, and the wound on her head looked serious. Joon-ho pressed his hands against it to slow the bleeding and shouted for a medic until his throat hurt. Station security arrived with medical teams, and they took over with quick efficiency, loading the Volante onto a stretcher and rushing her away. One of the security officers tried to stop Joon-ho for questioning, but he waved them off with a cough and a shake of his head. "I have cargo to deliver," he said, his voice rough from the smoke. He walked away before anyone could argue, ignoring the burns on his arms and the ache in his chest. That was just who he was. A man who did what needed doing and then moved on without waiting for thanks or reward. His captain yelled at him for being late and for smelling like smoke, and Joon-ho just nodded and got to work loading the cargo containers. By the time their ship left Harmony Point 3 hours later, he had almost forgotten about the Volante female. Almost in the medical bay of the station, the Volante opened her eyes slowly and looked up at the unfamiliar ceiling with confusion. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. A medical officer leaned over her with a gentle expression. "You are safe, honored guest, and you are at Harmony Point Station where you crashed several hours ago." "I remember fire," she said, touching the bandage on her head with careful fingers. "Yes, your shuttle malfunctioned during docking, but someone pulled you from the wreckage before it was too late. The Volante sat up despite the officer's protests, her wings twitching with agitation. Who saved me? A human honored guest, though he left before we could get his name. A human? She repeated, surprise clear in her voice. The medical officer nodded nervously, clearly uncomfortable talking to someone wearing the royal markings of the Volante Dominion. Find him, the Volante female said, and there was iron in her words despite her injuries. I must know who he is. But the human and his ship were already gone, jumping through space toward their next destination, completely unaware of what his simple act of courage had set into motion. Princess Kiravel of the Volante Dominion owed her life to a stranger, and in her culture, that debt could only be paid in one way. She reached for the communication device beside her bed and sent a message to the only person who could help her find this mysterious human, her mother, the Queen. The summon's 3 days passed like any other for Junho, filled with work and sleep and the quiet boredom of space travel between stations. Was in the engine room when the alarm started screaming, and he dropped his tools and ran to the bridge where his captain stood frozen at the viewport. What is happening? Junho asked, but then he saw it and his question died in his throat. A Volante warship hung in space before them, massive and beautiful and terrifying, its hull covered in patterns that seemed to glow with inner light. Their cargo ship looked like an insect next to a mountain. They are ordering us to stop, the captain said, his voice shaking. Why would the Volante care about us? Asked the navigator, a young woman named Chen, who had only been with them for a few months. No one had an answer. The communication screen flickered to life, showing a Volante officer with cold eyes and a stiff posture. You will prepare for boarding, the officer said without greeting or explanation. We carry one human passenger to our ship, and he will come willingly or we will take him by force. Junho felt ice spread through his chest. They mean me, he said quietly. What did you do? The captain demanded, fear making his words sharp. I do not know. But that was not entirely true. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered the burning shuttle and the unconscious female he had carried to safety. The boarding was quick and efficient, with Volante soldiers moving through their ship like ghosts, their movements graceful despite their size. They found Junho waiting in the cargo bay, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons. I will come with you, he said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. Just leave my crew alone. The soldiers said nothing, simply forming around him and guiding him toward their shuttle. The flight to the warship took only minutes, but each second felt like an hour as Junho wondered what fate awaited him. Had he broken some law by touching a Volante? Would they execute him for daring to put his human hands on one of their people? The warship interior was stunning, all smooth curves and soft lighting, and Junho might have appreciated its beauty if he was not being marched toward what he assumed would be his death. They brought him to a vast chamber where a throne sat on a raised platform, and on that throne was the most impressive being Junho had ever seen. He was taller than any Volante he had glimpsed before. Her wings spread wide behind her like a cloak of living crystal, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. Kneel before Queen Selvithra, ruler of the Volante Dominion, announced the guard. Junho knelt, not because he wanted to, but because his legs had decided to give up on him anyway. So this is the human, the queen said, her voice filling the chamber like music made from ice and steel. This small, soft creature who pulled my daughter from fire and death. Junho looked up in surprise. Your daughter? Princess Kiravel, heir to my throne and most precious treasure of my heart, who would have died in that burning wreckage if not for you. Relief flooded through him so strongly that he almost laughed. I thought you were going to kill me, he admitted. The queen tilted her head, and something like amusement flickered across her face. Kill you? No, human. I have summoned you here for a very different purpose. She stood from her throne and descended the steps toward him, and Junho forced himself to stay still as she approached in the Volanthi Dominion. There is a law older than our space travel, older than our written history, and it states that one who saves a royal life becomes bound to that life forever. I do not understand. Junho said carefully, "You saved my daughter. Human, and that means you must marry her." The words hit him like a physical blow, and for several seconds he could only stare at the queen with his mouth hanging open. Marry her? He finally managed. That is the law, and I will not see it broken even for a human. But I do not even know her. That is irrelevant. I am a cargo ship engineer. Also irrelevant. Junho scrambled to his feet, forgetting all about proper respect in his shock. Your Majesty, this is madness. And surely there must be another way to repay a debt. The Queen's eyes narrowed dangerously. You refuse the honor of joining the royal family? I refuse to marry someone who has not chosen me, and I refuse to trap your daughter in a marriage she did not ask for. Silence fell over the chamber, and every guard tensed as if expecting the Queen to order his execution. Instead, she simply stared at him with an expression he could not read. Interesting, she said softly. A door opened at the side of the chamber, and Junho turned to see the female from the shuttle walking toward them. She looked healthy now, her wound healed, her metallic skin gleaming under the lights, and her eyes fixed on him with obvious displeasure. So you are the one, Princess Kiravel said, stopping several feet away from him. I expected someone more impressive, and I expected to be heading to my next delivery instead of standing in your throne room. Junho shot back before he could stop himself. The princess's wings fluttered with what might have been surprise or anger. You dare speak to me that way? I dare speak to anyone any way I choose, princess. Because where I come from, we judge people by their actions, not their titles. The Queen watched this exchange with growing interest, and something in her expression suggested she was enjoying the confrontation far more than a mother should. This will be entertaining, she murmured. Neither Junho nor Kiravel heard her. Too focused on glaring at each other across the polished floor, they had no idea what challenges awaited them, and neither could have predicted how much their lives were about to change. The conflict, the royal palace on the Volanthi homeworld, was a structure of impossible beauty, with towers that reached toward the sky like frozen flames and gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers. Junho hated every corner of it. For 2 weeks he had been a guest who could not leave, treated with respect but watched constantly, and given comfortable rooms that still felt like a prison cell. The Queen had insisted he stay until the matter of the marriage was properly resolved, whatever that meant. And no amount of arguing had changed her mind. He spent most of his time in the gardens, the only place where the guards gave him some space to breathe. And it was there that Princess Kiravel found him on the 15th day. You are still sulking, she said, appearing from behind a tree with her wings folded tight against her back. I am not sulking, he replied without looking at her. I am planning my escape. There is no escape from this palace. Then I am sulking. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, surprising them both. And then her face hardened again, as if she was angry at herself for showing any warmth. I did not ask for this either, she said, moving to stand beside him. I know, Junho admitted. Then why do you act as if I am your enemy? He finally looked at her, seeing the frustration in her eyes that matched his own. Because it is easier to be angry than to be confused. Kiravel was silent for a moment, her gaze drifting to the glowing flowers around them. I was on that station because I was running away, she said quietly. Running from what? From a marriage my mother arranged with Lord Vexer of the Northern Territories. A male I despise more than I can say. Junho felt his anger shift into something more like sympathy. Your mother forces you into marriages often? Only when politics demand it, and Vexer controls resources our empire needs. So my mother believed the alliance was worth my happiness. That is cruel. That is royalty. They stood together in uncomfortable silence. Two people trapped by circumstances neither had chosen. Why did you save me? Kiravel asked. Suddenly Junho shrugged. You were dying, and I could help. So I helped, but you did not know who I was. And you gained nothing from the risk. I did not need to gain anything. She stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. Among my people, everything is calculated, every action weighed against its benefit, and no one does anything without expecting something in return. Then your people are missing something important. Before she could respond, a servant rushed into the garden with panic on his face. Princess, Lord Vexer has arrived at the palace and demands an audience with the queen. Kiravel went pale, her wings trembling. He cannot be here, and he was not supposed to know where I went. What will he do? Junho asked. He will claim me as his property and demand the original marriage proceed. They hurried back to the throne room, where Queen Selvithra sat on her throne facing a Volanthi, male who radiated arrogance from every line of his body. Lord Vexer was massive, even for his species, with dark coloring and wings that bore battle scars. His eyes found Kiravel immediately, and his smile made Junho want to punch him. There she is, Vexer said loudly. My promised bride who fled like a coward before our wedding. The arrangement was dissolved. The queen said coldly, By what right? By the right of the life debt. Because this human saved my daughter's life and now holds a claim that supersedes your own. Vexer looked at Junho for the first time, and his face twisted with disgust. This creature? This soft pale nothing? Careful, Junho said quietly. Humans are small, but we bite. Vexer laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. Your Majesty, surely you cannot be serious. And surely you will not insult my house by suggesting this human is equal to a lord of the Dominion. The law is clear, the queen replied. Then let us test this human through the law as well. Vexer stepped forward, his wings spreading wide in challenge. I invoked the right of contest, and I challenge this human to combat for the right to the princess's hand. Gasps filled the chamber, and Kiravel grabbed Junho's arm. No, he cannot do this. I can and I have, Vexer said with cruel satisfaction. Let your human champion fight me in the arena, and when I kill him the matter will be settled forever. The queen's face was unreadable, but Junho saw something like concern flicker in her eyes. Human, you have the right to refuse and to leave this world in peace, because the right of contest erases all other claims. If I refuse, what happens to her? Junho asked, nodding toward Kiravel. She will marry Lord Vexer as originally planned. Junho looked at Kiravel, saw the fear she was trying to hide, and felt something settle in his chest like a stone sinking into still water. Then, I accept the challenge. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. But Junho kept his eyes on Vexer, refusing to show the terror that was screaming inside his mind. Fool, Vexer said with a grin. You just chose your death. The challenge the arena was ancient, carved from stone that had witnessed 1,000 battles, and the seats surrounding it were filled with Volanthi who had come to watch the impossible, a human fighting a lord of the Dominion. Betting odds were so one-sided that most bookmakers had stopped taking wagers, because everyone knew how this would end. Junho stood in a preparation chamber beneath the arena, wearing the simple combat clothes they had given him, and he tried to slow his breathing as sweat dripped down his face. The door opened and Queen Selvithra entered, her guards remaining outside. You do not have to do this, she said without any of her usual coldness. The law allows you to withdraw even now, and leave your daughter to that monster? She is my concern, not yours. Junho met her eyes, seeing the worry she was trying to hide. When I pulled Kiravel from that shuttle, I did not do it halfway, and I will not protect her halfway now. The queen studied him for a long moment. "You are not what I expected humans to be." "What did you expect?" "Weakness and selfishness and greed." "Because that is what the galaxy says about your kind." "The galaxy does not know us very well." Something like respect flickered across her face. "Perhaps not." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "In the arena, Vexer will try to end the fight quickly because he knows that is his advantage. So if you can survive long enough to make him angry, he may make mistakes." "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Do not thank me yet, human, because I am not certain I have helped you at all." She left, and moments later another visitor, Red Crovel, slipped through the door like a shadow. Her wings wrapped tight around her body. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice thick with emotion. "I already told you. You told my mother you would not protect me halfway. But that is not a real answer, and I need to understand." Junho sighed and sat down on the bench, suddenly feeling very tired. On Earth, there's a story about a man who found a dragon trapped under a fallen tree. And the man freed the dragon, even though dragons were dangerous. And when people asked him why he risked his life, he said it was because the dragon needed help and he could provide it. What happened to the man? The dragon became his friend and protected him for the rest of his days. Caravel knelt before him, her eyes searching his face. "You expect me to protect you?" "I expect nothing, princess, because that is not why I act. And I help because helping is right, not because I want rewards." She reached out and touched his hand, her fingers cool against his skin. "Humans are very strange. So I've been told." A horn sounded from above, signaling that the fight would begin soon. Caravel stood quickly, but she did not leave immediately. "Do not die," she said firmly. "I will try my best." The arena floor was hard-packed sand that crunched under his feet as Junho walked to the center, and the roar of the crowd was overwhelming. Thousands of Velanti watching him with curiosity, and Piety Vexer entered from the opposite side. Massive and confident, his body marked with patterns that showed his many victories. "Look at you," Vexer called out. "So small and fragile and pathetic." Junho said nothing, conserving his energy and watching his opponent move. The signal came, a flash of light from the royal box, and Vexer attacked immediately. He was fast, faster than anything his size should be. And Junho barely dodged the first strike. The second caught him in the side, sending him rolling across the sand with pain exploding through his ribs. The crowd cheered. Junho got up. Vexer attacked again, and Junho took another hit, this time to the shoulder, and the impact nearly broke bone. He got up again. "Why do you keep rising?" Vexer demanded, confusion mixing with his arrogance. "Because I am human," Junho answered, "and we do not stay down." The fight continued, brutal and one-sided, with Vexer landing blow after blow, while Junho dodged what he could and absorbed what he could not. Minutes passed, then more minutes, and something began to change. Vexer was breathing harder, his strikes becoming wilder. His patience wearing thin. The Velanti were built for quick, decisive battles, not endurance contests. And Junho had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill you and persistence was survival. "Stay still," Vexer roared. Missing another swing, Junho saw his opening. He ducked under Vexer's arm and struck hard at the joint where wing met shoulder, a weak point he had noticed during the fight. And Vexer screamed with pain and rage. The crowd went silent. Junho pressed his attack, moving faster than his battered body should allow, hitting the same spot again and again until Vexer's wing hung useless at his side. "Yield," Junho said, standing over his fallen opponent. "Never." Vexer lunged upward, and Junho sidestepped and brought his elbow down on the back of Vexer's head. The Lord collapsed and did not rise again. Silence held the arena for one heartbeat. Then two. Then the crowd erupted with a sound Junho had never heard before. A Volante cheering for a human He looked up at the royal box where the queen sat motionless, her expression unreadable, and beside her Caravel was on her feet with tears streaming down her face. "The human wins," the announcer declared. Disbelief clear in his voice, Junho fell to his knees, exhaustion finally claiming him. But he was smiling despite the pain. He had done, had won. The choice 1 week had passed since the arena, and Junho's body was finally beginning to heal. The Volanthi medical technology was impressive, mending cracked ribs and torn muscles far faster than any human hospital could have managed. But the doctors still insisted he rest instead of wandering the palace. He ignored them. Of course, the gardens had become his favorite place to think, with their strange glowing flowers and the soft hum of insects that flickered with their own light. And he spent hours there each day wondering what would happen next. The queen summoned him on the 8th day. He entered the throne room to find it empty, except for Selvethra herself, who stood by a window looking out at her world. "You have caused quite a disturbance," she said without turning around. "I seem to do that wherever I go." She made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Lord Vexer has retreated to his territory in disgrace, and his allies have abandoned him. And the northern territories are already sending messages asking to negotiate new trade agreements without his involvement. Good, because he deserved to lose more than just a fight." The queen turned to face him, and there was something different in her eyes, something almost warm. "When you first arrived, I thought you were an accident of fate, a strange joke the universe had played on my daughter and my house. And now? Now I think the universe may be wiser than I gave it credit for." She gestured for him to approach, and he climbed the steps to stand before her throne. "The rite of contest has been fulfilled, and you have proven yourself worthy in the eyes of our law, which means the life debt is satisfied, and you have earned the right to claim my daughter's hand." "But?" Junho asked, sensing there was more. "But I am not my ancestors, and I do not believe in forcing hearts where they do not wish to go." She placed a hand on his shoulder, the first time she had touched him. "You may leave, Park Junho of Earth, with my gratitude and my respect, and no obligation will follow you." He had expected to feel relief, but instead he felt something else, something complicated and unexpected. What about Caravel? She will remain here, free from Vexer's claim, free to choose her own path. What does she want? The queen's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Perhaps you should ask her yourself." She nodded toward a side door, and Junho turned to see Caravel standing there, her wings shimmering nervously. He walked to her, leaving the queen behind, and together they stepped out into the garden where everything had started to change. "You are free to go," Caravel said, her voice carefully neutral. "I heard. You must be pleased, because you can return to your cargo ships and your human life." "I should be pleased," he agreed. "But?" He stopped walking and faced her, seeing the hope she was trying to hide behind her careful mask. "But I keep thinking about something you said, about how your people calculate everything and expect something in return for every action. I remember. I saved you without expecting anything, and I fought Vexer without expecting anything. But somewhere along the way I started wanting something." Caravel's wings trembled. "What do you want?" "Time," he said simply. "Time to know you better, to learn about your world, to see if this strange connection between us could become something real." "You would stay?" "I would stay, but not as a prize you won in combat, and not as a husband forced on you by ancient law, but as a friend who wants to become more if you want the same thing." She stared at him for a long moment, and then her wings spread wide and caught the light like living rainbows. "Among my people, spreading wings like this is a sign of joy," she said. "I will remember that." They walked deeper into the garden together, talking about small things at first, their favorite foods and their childhood memories, and the strange path that had brought them together. Behind them, The queen watched from her window with satisfaction. 3 months later, a new ambassador arrived at the Galactic Council, a human representing a historic alliance. Between Earth and the Volante Dominion, Park Junho stood before the gathered representatives of 100 worlds and spoke about cooperation and friendship and the bridges that could be built between different peoples. The Volante delegation supported him loudly, their cheers echoing through the chamber. And when the session ended, Princess Kiravel was waiting for him with a smile that made his heart race. "You did well," she said. "I had good motivation." She took his hand, something that would have been unthinkable for a Volante princess just months ago. And together they walked toward their shuttle. The galaxy watched with wonder as the unlikely pair became symbols of a new era. Proof that courage and kindness could overcome any barrier between species. And sometimes, late at night when they sat together watching stars, Junho would remember the burning shuttle and the split-second decision that had changed everything. He had not saved a princess that day, he had saved a future.